Peter had no special authority. Peter was not the first pope. He didn't have any special primacy or jurisdiction over the other apostles or other early Christians. In fact, he denies this by referring to himself as merely a fellow presbyter, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1, an office lower than an overseer, bishop. If anything, Paul had a greater authority than Peter. Although St. Peter never called himself Pope in Scripture, he did indeed have a special apostolic primacy and jurisdiction. The scriptural evidence for this is substantial and explicit. Let's take a tour of the major scriptural monuments that testify to his primacy. As we trace the outlines of Simon Peter's presence in the New Testament, one thing soon becomes clear. Christ promised that Peter would have a special primacy and leadership among the apostles, but that role wasn't fully assumed by him until after Christ's earthly ministry came to a close. But once the Lord had ascended into heaven, once the infant church was on its feet and moving forward with the message of the gospel, then we see Peter step fully into his ministry. The Galilean fisherman. Who was this man, Peter? His story is as dramatic as any in Scripture. It begins with an unusual conversation on the shore of Lake Galilee. It ends painfully 1,000 miles away and 30 years later in a Roman arena. Scripture is filled with information about him and tells us much about what kind of a man he was. A Galilean fisherman, hot-headed, intense in his relationships. He was called away from his fishing boat by Jesus Christ to be one of the original 12 apostles. He walked the dusty hills of Palestine, shoulder to shoulder with the Lord for the next 3 years, sharing the hardships and triumphs of his ministry, witnessing the miracles, performing miracles himself at Christ's command. He heard the gospel preached directly from Christ's mouth. He sat at the table of the Last Supper and watched Christ celebrate the first Eucharist. That very night, his fear overwhelmed him, and he abandoned his master just as the sorrowful mystery of his passion began to unfold. Under oath, he denied even knowing Christ, preferring to skulk in the shadows while his closest friend was being interrogated, tortured, and executed. But after the resurrection, Peter changed. He was imbued with God's grace in a special way and left cowardice behind. As the book of Acts records, he very quickly became the apostle Christ wanted him to be, courageous, humble, unswervingly dedicated to his apostolate. The leadership he showed only partially during the gospel accounts of Christ's earthly ministry blossomed and was fully actuated, beginning with the day of Pentecost.